Hello everyone, this is Jacob Popio, the producer of The Apex. In this episode, Jan interviews Noah Jones. Noah is a full-time journalist and podcaster with Richland Source out of Mansfield, Ohio. He hosts shows such as The Open Mic, a show about musicians, and Chalk Murder to Me, a true crime series. If you want to support us, there are 3 ways to do so. One is to donate to our cause at www.patreon.com/The Apex Podcast. Secondly, visit our merch line that is proudly partnered with Envision Clothing Company at envisionclothingcompany.com. The other is completely free. All we ask is if you learned something from this episode or know someone that needs to hear our message, share it with them. Please subscribe and hope this pushes you toward your apex.
Welcome, Apex Chasers, to another episode of the Apex Podcast. As always, I am your host, Jan Almasy, and unfortunately, today there is not an RJ Holiday seated across the table from me. I know that you guys are always looking forward to that announcement, but today I'm actually on the road, y'all. So I am in Mansfield, Ohio today, sitting at Richland Source, and I'm going to be interviewing a gentleman that reached out, and we got in contact because I am working on an organization called Podcast Ohio. For those of you that have not figured out what that is yet, if you are a podcaster in the state of Ohio, it's basically a community where we can all get together. It's a free place, a directory for you to list your show. And our end goal is to be able to provide a community where everybody's giving each other advice and potentially hosting meetups at a larger scale in either Canton or Columbus coming up here in the near future. But for right now, let's go ahead and dive in with our guest for today, who is a podcaster as part of his full-time job out here with the Richland Source Media Group. Is that maybe correct to say?
Yeah. I think that we do a little bit of everything. So media group is probably a safe word.
A safe word. Perfect. So everybody, please welcome Noah Jones.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fantastic, man.
I'm doing well.
This is the first time I've sat in a studio with, I think, this much soundproofing.
Yeah, we sort of went all out, didn't we?
Ridiculous.
It's I run a podcast called West 4th and Goal. It's about football, and it's with our sports writer, and he always talks about it looking like we're on the moon, and I sort of see the craters of the moon. It's just all white foam.
As soon as we shut those double doors, it was just like nothing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it truly is incredible. We even went so far as so we work in this building called IdeaWorks, and it's a public space, and people, the lunchroom is right outside of our glass doors. We sort of call this the aquarium. And so outside in the real world, there are people who eat and and slam doors. So we went through and even switched the door from being a swing open, swing closed door from being a push to open, like with a push bar that like horrible pushing mechanical
like
noise,
the clicking sound and opening and everything.
Yeah, so I can't say how awesome it is to have this because it's just unbelievable, especially the way that the whole podcast thing began here at Richland Source. It was really just me and a handheld recorder, mostly because I was like, this is something that's really cool that I sort of always wanted to do. And
why not?
Right.
Yeah,
and
I mean, if we've recorded, and the beautiful thing, I love these SM7Bs.
Yeah.
These are like my favorite microphones, so I was super excited when
it's really cool when you see like professional musicians recording on the same microphones that you record on. It's like, oh, we've made it.
Yep. SM7Bs, the cloud lifters. We actually use ones by SE Electronics. We use a Dynamite stick, which is essentially the same thing as the cloud lifter.
Sure.
But no, as soon as I walked in, I was like, damn, okay, we got a legit setup in here today, boys.
Yeah, Richland Source goes all out on the things that we go all out on.
That's perfect. Sure. So we'll just, let's back it up and talk about you a little bit.
All right.
Because I'm curious, I've tried to do as much creeping on the interwebs as I possibly can. But
then you should know my whole life story because I really try to be as accessible as possible in this world. Yeah.
Right. And so I mostly listened to, some of the podcast episodes, went through your Facebook page and some other stuff. So why don't we talk about where you were born and raised?
Awesome. So I was born in a suburb of I was born in Clayton, Missouri at the hospital. No, I'm sorry. We're going to scratch that in post. I was born in St. Louis downtown at Barnes Jewish Hospital, and that's a significant hospital because my mom worked at the St. Louis Children's Hospital, but for whatever reason, they don't give birth there. So I always thought that was a little ironic. But I grew up in Webster Groves and Clayton, Missouri. My parents divorced when I was 3, so I split time in those 2 suburbs. They're both really awesome places. I think that they both sort of had a huge impact on my life.
Right.
Clayton is one of the most wealthy areas in Missouri, and Webster Groves is not that far back, but it's not as affluent. So I think the behaviors were different, if that makes sense. I would say that the Claytonians, as I call them, were a little bit uppity and thought highly of themselves. And then in Webster, there were certainly people like that, but for the most part, everyone got along really well, and it was really cool. And I ended up going to high school with the Webster Grove School District specifically because they had a really great music program. I sang in choir, and I did all kinds of things with a cappella groups, and I was in band for the first 2 years, and it was awesome. And I think that really sort of has an impact on my life today, because now I get to write about music, and I'm in a band, and I do all kinds of crazy things like that.
How long did you sing a cappella for?
Well, so my freshman year of high school, I joined Amen, which stood for Acapella Men. And then there was another one that sort of came to fruition my sophomore year that I was also a part of. And then in college, I started an a cappella group called Not Yet Perfect, which I believe is still running, though by a different name, and I don't know what that name is.
Founded the group?
I did, yeah. Me and this one guy named Michael Moisinko.
That is a badass last name.
Yeah. Yeah, that was about where the cool stopped, but yeah.
I sang a cappella for close to a decade.
Very cool.
Yeah, me and my co-founder actually met because our group was on tour in Rome.
Oh, awesome.
And we were like singing just like hymns and some of the more a cappella Catholic songs.
Yeah, sacred music is
beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So
the harmonies in that, oftentimes are just unbelievable. That was always my favorite part of going to church with my parents, was when we got to sing hymns. I would always be sure to sing the bass part while everyone else sang the melody or something.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. There's only one time, actually twice, 2 times I can think of that I've ever cried in my singing career.
Okay.
And one of them was singing the intonation solo for the Ave Maria at St. Peter's Basilica.
Ave Maria just does it for me.
Yeah.
It gives me the chills. We're talking about it, and I just got my hair just stood up.
And I got to sing it right in front of St. Peter's throne.
Okay.
In St. Peter's Basilica. And I sang the intonation solo, and then the rest of the choir came in, and I lost my shit.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yep. Over. All over. But that's cool. I love listening to those little pieces, because there's a lot of people that they almost forget those little chunks and how they could be applicable in life in general. And that's one thing that I really like to focus on Apex side is listen, just because I don't sing a cappella anymore doesn't mean that the fact that I learned in a cappella, and this is a life skill, right? And you don't make, a lot of people in choir don't put the puzzle pieces together. But for anybody that's sang a cappella, or even in a symphony chorus or anything for any period of time, knows that it's not all about their voice.
Yeah.
That it's about blending.
I completely agree. I think that one of the biggest things that I took away from my high school, middle school, collegiate choir singing experiences is teamwork and working together, because
you have to know when to back off to highlight the soprano part. You have to know when to mold and when to step forward and pull back. It's this beautiful game of just pulling, the tide coming in and rolling back.
Absolutely.
And being able to take that from singing and apply that to the real world has been exponentially valuable in my life.
For sure. Yeah, I would say the same. I think that sort of thing can also, you obviously, I think you get that from playing sports in high school or middle school or wherever. But I think that it's sort of underrated, the amount of teamwork and consistent focus on your part,
rehearsal time,
and all of that sort of stuff just really has made a huge impact on my life.
Because I remember it used to irk me, and we're kind of rabbit holing here a little bit, but whatever.
It's okay. I'm enjoying it.
I was a 3-sport athlete as well as being in band and singing a cappella in high school. And so band ended up dropping off at my junior year because I wanted to play football.
Sure.
But I had wrestled since I was like, could walk, essentially. And I vividly remember all the time when I started singing a cappella, because I didn't even know I could sing until like sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
And like the choir director just heard me singing in the hallway the one day, and it was kind of like High School Musical-esque, handing me like a tryout paper. And was like, hey, you should come. You should come try to do this. And I was like, I don't even sing in church. Like, okay, we'll give it a shot. And then I made it into the a cappella group, not just like the general chorus. And I was like, okay. But the wrestlers would always give me crap for singing.
Sure.
They were like, oh, what are you doing singing, man? Like, you could be going to training and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, it's not that hard. Like, why are you dedicating so much time to it? And I was like, all right. I was like, you come out and try to memorize, 16-part dance moves in sequence while you're singing, mic'd up, and try to manage your breath while you're dropping a girl down, to the floor and picking her back up so she doesn't crack her face off of the stage. But
I never had to do the dance moves, but that sounds like a workout on its own.
Oh, my Lord, baby Jesus. Like, I'm glad that I was an athlete, because some of the people that were in choir weren't.
Sure.
And trying to keep up with some of the like dances and stuff that we do, because we were a show a cappella choir. So we like compete at like Tiffin University and go to like different shows and stuff like that. It was a blast.
Yeah.
I love doing that. I miss like... There's nothing to me that replaces being able to make music with other people. I think that it's a universal language, and that it is a freedom of expression in its rawest form. It's just beautiful. Everything about it's awesome.
No, I think that there's like this moment that I remember feeling all the time, especially in high school and in college as well, where like the whole choir just sort of gets to a chord, and we're all just sort of like singing the chord, right? And everything just sort of blends so beautifully, and it's kind of like, let's just hold this out forever.
Right. You start to hear like the overtone whistles from up top.
Yeah.
And at first you're like, what are those?
Right.
What's happening?
Yeah. The first time you do it, you're like, oh, something weird just happened. But
right.
then
I
it's
just
like,
heard another note.
Let's do it again.
Yeah. So you sang and everything like that. You progressed beyond high school and everything like that. Where did you end up at college?
I went to Bowling Green State University.
Okay.
Solely because it was the only university that I applied for. I also tried to apply to the University of Maryland. My mom lived in Washington, D.C. by the time I had just finished high school. And so she really wanted me to go to the University of Maryland. And I think that if I had gone to the University of Maryland, my entire life would be very different. I actually had an internship in Washington, D.C. my sophomore year with a guy who now is the social media editor at the Washington Post. And so I sort of feel like I have underachieved. But no. So anyway, in high school, I did all of my side of the work to apply for the University of Maryland, and I discovered that my counselor or advisor, whatever they're called in high school, neglected to send my transcripts. So Bowling Green was the only one that I applied to, so that's where I went. And I guess what I took out of that is that you should always apply to more than one school, just in case someone else like messes up your life.
Yeah, you got to make sure you have the warm and fuzzies.
Right, yeah.
Trust but verify.
Yeah, and so I ended up going to BGSU, and it was an incredible experience. My best friend and I met there, and
what degree did you pursue there?
I got a journalism degree.
Okay. Now, what all does that actually entail as far as journalism? Is it like courses in English and?
Yeah. So, there was a lot of things that I felt could have overlapped with the like creative writing or English classes,
right?
But they were all considered journalism classes. There were things like learning how to be a feature writer, or I took a sports writing class because I thought I was going to be a sports writer. There were just sort of like the building blocks that you need to understand how to write a breaking news story with the most important information at the top of the article, because no one's going to read a 700-word story unless it's like about something that they're really passionate about. And people just, I mean, I just finished a series for Richland Source about public art, and one story went viral not because of anything that I wrote about, but because we hired a friend of mine to Photoshop public art against the bare, ugly walls in downtown Mansfield. And so, I mean, I think that just sort of proves that you could write a story about anything, but only very few people are going to actually care. And so that sort of sucks, right? But it's important to know that, you know, if someone shot someone, you got to put that in the first two sentences, because if you don't, no one's going to know the information.
Right. And my big thing with that, there's a lot of stuff that you're gonna write and nobody's gonna care. I have that same kind of idea, and it's not that like you said, the one article went viral because of X, Y, and Z reasons. I do a lot of content advising with people. And it's not really content advising for me because I'm basically a mini Gary Vee, but it's really like my whole mantra. And I've been like this since I knew that Gary Vee was even a thing, or that Andy Frisella was a thing, or some of these like larger people that have big podcast names, Joe Rogan, that I've been a firm believer in iterations. So trying something, not working, trying a little bit different version of that same thing, it not working, doing the same thing over and over again. The entire reason why the Apex brand has built like to where it's at now is literally just iteration after iteration after iteration. We started out as JJD, then we were JJD Thoughts, then we were a blog, then we were a blog with a little bit of audio, then we were a podcast, then we were a podcast that grew into adding video. Now, you know, it's just kind of adding thing, and it's just relentless amounts of positive content or reporting that'll end up, you know, all you need is that one or two that people really get your attention on. And so I really have props for like journalists and people that are consistently putting out content, because I know what it's like to put out content that doesn't get that traction and how that can feel sometimes, especially if you put a lot of effort into an article. But the like audacity that it takes to push out that content, and like the ferocity at which you have to just approach that and just consistently put it out, not for the purposes of people consuming it, but to do the article justice. I think that it's also
important here to state that, you know, just because no one, or not no one, but just because not very many people read the whole article, that doesn't mean that you're not making that article impactful for one person, even if it's the person that the article is about.
There it is. And that's what it is, like making it about the story, not about the people consuming the story.
Well, right.
And about like who is that story about, or who is it for?
Exactly. Yeah.
How many people?
So like the public art story, I mean, yeah, we publish it on our Facebook, or we push it out on our site, and then it goes to our Facebook page for general consumption. But the people we wanted to read that article were the city councilmen,
right,
and the mayor and other like actual movers and shakers in the area, yeah, at downtown Mansfield, specific people in charge,
right. Yeah, you can put out targeted stuff like that,
right.
That is, it's. I mean, it's. I think people think that they have to, when they put out content, there has to be some like really intricate thought process and strategy that goes into it. And I'm like, sometimes you just got to put out good stuff.
Right.
You just put out content.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Well, you also sometimes, I think, get surprised with what does well, because you don't know things. And I think that it's really important. And I always try and say this anytime that I talk about journalism. Good stories are about people.
Yep.
And that's what people connect with. You can write a story about how the economy is going to collapse, right? And I don't know that that's going to happen, but I'm just saying you could write a story about that. But unless you're talking about how the economy's collapse affects
people.
John Q. Public, no one's really going to remember the stats that you put in, unless you're baking it in between these moments where you're like, yeah, John Q. Public lost half of his finances and has to sleep outside now because his stocks went down, or like, you know what I mean? Like
people
those
care
are things
about people.
people remember. Yeah, exactly.
That's why our whole mantra is ordinary people, extraordinary things.
Yeah.
And we're taking that and then distilling down practical advice that you can use on a daily basis. But it's regardless of what that person went through, it'd be easy to give you a 5 bullet point list of what this person told me you should do on a daily basis. Instead, we're going to talk about where they were born, where they were raised, what things that they did in high school, and give you that whole life story so that you can connect to the person.
Right.
Not just a 5 bullet point list of, here are the top 5 things that you should do if you want to become a successful content marketer.
Yeah.
Because there's already 15 billion of those.
Right. Yeah. For a subscription fee, of course.
Yeah. So what was your first job outside of college? Yeah, definitely subscription fee.
My first job outside of college was with the Nevada Daily Mail, and it was a real physical newspaper, which is Richland Source, where I work now, is online only. And so the Nevada Daily Mail is spelled like Nevada. And
I was just going to say, did you move to the West Coast?
No, well, I moved to the most west county in Missouri.
Gotcha.
It's maybe, I think if I remember correctly, it's like an hour and a half south of Kansas City.
Gotcha.
And that job was sort of important for me to have taken, I think, because it was a town of 800 people. There were more cows and corn than there were human beings. And I really hated it there, if I'm being honest with you. Right. It was really hard because I'm a pretty social person. I really like to be around people. And there was like a all girls college there, and I didn't like that. So like when I was offered the job, they were like telling me that like, oh, there's so many young people, but it was like all these all these young women, and I had no way of like ever meeting anyone there because it's the kind of town where there's a lot of like anyone who's anyone ends up going to college and staying away because why would you come back to a town of 800 people where everyone is living in poverty? Right. And so I lasted about 6 months before I found Richland Source online at journalismjobs.com, and they hired me, and I've been here for about 4 years. This is my 4th year, so about 5 years, I guess. My anniversary is in February.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you uprooted and moved up to the OH.
I did. Well, so I went to Bowling Green, which is in Ohio, and my mom now lives in Cincinnati. I have grandparents who live in Upper Sandusky. So
you're kind of splitting the difference almost in Mansfield.
Correct. Yeah. So it's really sort of the perfect location for me, because if there's like a health issue with my grandparents, I can go up there in 45 minutes. Yep. If I need a good meal as opposed to what I can make, I go see my mom, which is only 3 hours away. So, it's not bad. And I think that one of the reasons, I guess I should just say, one of the reasons that I wanted to get to Mansfield most was because the census back in like 2010 or whatever said there were 47,000 people in Mansfield. And when I was in a town of 800, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so many more potential friends than I have now. Right. So I like jumped at the chance. What I didn't realize, I guess what I didn't really realize is that 47,000 people is not the same population as St. Louis, which I guess I sort of didn't think about. Yeah. So, I mean, like, there are plenty of people here, and I have some of the best friends that I've ever made in Mansfield. And I have these little pockets of places that I can go. we met today at Relax, and I think I said hi to at least 7 different people on our
just
way
walking on
back.
The street. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know plenty of people, and it's a really great place for me to get to grow, not only as a reporter, but as a human being. I think that it's absolutely sort of changed, my perspectives, because it's not there's a lot of big city thinking that happens in St. Louis, and that's not necessarily the case here.
Right. Yeah, Mansfield is a nice mixture of like small town, but you also have the 179th up the road. You've got they've got some pretty staple organizations in the city or around the city that are really like powerhouses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gorman Rupp pumps and stuff like that.
Things that you just don't really even expect have these like national reaches, like Gorman Rupp, for instance.
Yeah, I interviewed like Rich Green, retired Brigadier General Richard Green. His wife is involved with Gorman Rupp. I've interviewed him on our show a couple of times.
Cool.
Cool. Oh, really awesome, dude.
Yeah.
What I really love about like this population here, and it reminds me of Canton, is that everybody's like outside of the big city thinking. I've talked to a couple of people like in LA that are looking at trying to come onto the podcast network and stuff. And this one girl specifically, she's her name's Jill. She's got one arm and is a power lifter.
Oh, I mean, not her, but I've seen videos about that, and like I don't lift anymore because it hurts my back.
Yeah,
I think I did it wrong for so long.
Right.
But those people just are incredible.
Insane.
And then there are also these videos on like Facebook of like people with cerebral palsy who are deadlifting.
Yep.
And it's just kind of like, wow, I really need to start lifting again because I am so lame.
Yeah, and she like when she told me like when I was reaching out to her about I was offering her all these different ways that we could help her and everything like that, and she was like, you are like nothing like people out here like in LA or San Fran and stuff like that. She was like, even like with me being the way that I am, people are still like trying to like suck every dollar out of me and just use me for my brand equity, and that's it.
Yeah,
like they
sucks.
don't care. And I was like, well, we're not on the West Coast, huh?
Right?
We in the Midwest, baby. We out here like making sure that we have each other's backs, and that's what I love about like these kind of smaller towns in Midwest Ohio.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, Northeast Ohio, technically, I guess.
Yeah. My mom lived in D.C. and she now lives in Cincinnati, as I've said at least twice on this podcast already. Shout out, hi mom. And one thing that she said, so she was like the president of the blood bank in Washington D.C. She was like the head of the oncology department at Washington D.C.'s Children's Hospital. She was a big deal.
She like a lab
I think she's really just a badass cancer doctor.
Cancer doctor.
She's just like, I mean, she's like, I could not be more proud of my mom. She's like literally one of the best doctors in the nation, and she has probably like the hardest job to like have to tell not just cancer, but of like adorable little children. I don't even want to pretend to understand what she has to go through on a regular basis. It sounds really mentally challenging.
Oh yeah.
So I oftentimes just don't even think about it.
Yep. And coming from an ICU nurse that has been in the room,
like
when announcements like that are going on, that is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you're literally taking the sunshine out of families' lives. I mean, like they probably have some idea that it's happening or that something is wrong. But I mean, anytime you hear cancer, the C word, right? It's just breathtaking.
And what I like try to point out with physicians, and then we'll kind of get back to your story here in a second. But like what I try to talk about with physicians and nurses is that we walk into patients' rooms, and in one patient's room, you're sucking all the light out of it. Mm-hmm. And then it's almost like you're taking that light that you just sucked out, and you may be walking into another person's room and pushing all the light into it.
Right.
So it's like this ebb and flow that constantly messes with your head.
Wow.
Because you walk in and now you just said a phrase that has an entire family in shambles. And you walk out, and the person next door you're discharging home because they just had a successful surgery.
Right.
And you can't take that negative energy into the positive energy room or vice versa.
Yeah.
You have to be able to compartmentalize and adjust your emotions accordingly to empathize with your patient, which is why I'm glad that I started out a nurse and I wasn't a journalism major, or marketing major or communications major or anything like that. When it comes down to marketing, content, podcasting, and anything like that, when we do consulting with businesses, I'm all about empathizing with my end user. So like between nursing and my clinical psych background, I'm able to take stories and tell them in a way that is going to empathize with the human part of the person that's supposed to be consuming that. So that's what I tell people. It's like, I may not be a communications major. I may not be a marketing major. I love English because my mom moved here from Slovakia. So she like really reinforced the fact that we had to know how to speak English because she still has trouble with it. So it was just like, oh, you have these English assignments? Here's an extra vocabulary textbook that you have to do. And it's just like constantly reinforcing that. So my vocabulary is amazing because my mom was so paranoid that I'd have a horrible vocabulary because she was raising us.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's overcompensated.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that one thing that I have learned, being a journalism major who's like paid to go and talk to people and to get things out of people that they may or may not want to just openly tell you.
Right.
I don't take notes when I have these interviews. I have a recorder out, and I really feel like I've become a much better listener in the past 5 years being a reporter here than I ever have before. Like even in high school, you just have to like pay attention to what they're saying, because if you are, I used to take notes and use a recorder. But I would learn that if I was like staring down at my paper taking notes, they didn't feel like I was listening to them. And to be completely honest with you, I probably wasn't in my first year at Richland Source. I was just relying on what I heard them say when I started writing.
Right.
So I hate doing phone interviews for that reason, because I have to take notes then. But I feel like if you can sort of develop this unspoken trust, right, where you're empathizing or showing emotion to the story that these people are telling you, whether it's, you know, a woman paints a mural and ends up changing the city of Hilliard, like I wrote about last week, or if it's a gunshot goes off in the middle of the night and you're talking to you're talking to a police officer about what happened, you have to show empathy, and you have to, I mean, you can't be overly dramatic about it, but you have to be able to show that you care.
You listen. I use the phrase listening to understand, not listening to respond.
Yeah. And that's happened to me several times on the podcast where on the open mic podcast, where if I'm talking to someone and I'm like really into what they're talking about, and they'll finish talking and I'll be like, I have nothing else to say, because I just have to like think about what it is that I was supposed to
processing.
say.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so
those moments are beautiful though. Inside of podcasting specifically,
Yeah.
I love those moments, because it's not like radio where we're on the specific timeline where we have to really just boom, boom, boom kind of move through things. You can have that 10-second gap of silence.
Right.
And just, holy crap.
Well, sometimes when I'm editing, there will be sort of this like gap where, you know, it sort of seems longer than it should be. But then like there will be like a sigh or like a breath. And it's kind of like, you know what? That's kind of a cool, like,
gonna leave it.
Shows. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That happens every once in a while.
So what, like, when you started the job at Richland Source, you weren't, you kind of said that you started this whole podcasting thing with a handheld recorder, right?
Yeah.
And kind of pioneered it a little bit. And so what I'm really interested with that is I started Apex in my apartment, little 2-bedroom, like $600 a month, crappy college apartment. I had like 4 different colors of furniture in there, and I'm pretty sure my fridge was like 90% leftover Taco Bell and Bud Light. But
nice. That's water.
Yeah, basically.
Hydration's key.
Exactly. And so like I started it there with some like ragtag group of microphones, where it's basically like we had one Neumann that my buddy had because he was in a band, and then just a bunch of random Sennheisers and Audio Technicas or whatever. But it was just all in an apartment. And now we're at the point where we have our own studio and everything. And that's kind of where we're sitting here. You know what I mean? So what did that journey look like? How did you get into pitching podcasting to the organization as a whole? Because now podcasting is a part of your full-time job.
Yeah.
So what did that transition look like for those listeners that are out there that maybe want to try to bring podcasting to the table of their organization? How can they do that? And we'll just use your storyline as a way.
Well,
to
yeah.
get them to help them do that.
I mean, I think a lot of it mostly is an attribution. Most of it is all because I work for Richland Source, and Richland Source, the owners of Richland Source, fully believe that you have to try and fail in order to succeed. And I've literally never worked at a place where that's sort of our mantra.
Can I get an amen and a hallelujah?
No, but like
my
for real,
God.
I have more freedom here to do whatever I want and suck at it than anywhere else.
That's amazing.
It's unbelievable.
It's all those different iterations that I talked about. It's like you're not going to know what works unless you find out what doesn't.
Right. So Carl Ferniak, who owns Richland Source, I'm having trouble speaking, has constantly said that you have to be able to throw spaghetti against a wall, and if anything sticks to it, awesome. Try and keep doing it until it falls down. But if there's anything that falls down, you just sort of have to forget about it, you know, and move forward. And it's this whole idea of that I think really got everything that Richland Source does on a regular basis going. So, for instance, Newsroom After Hours, where we throw live concerts in the newsroom, is awesome, and that was sort of something that failed until we got it right. And we've done several things. I've done several things myself that have not worked out very well, or maybe I just didn't like them, so I stopped doing them. Podcasting is probably one of the things that I have gotten as best as possible. And so that started off by me having a passion for helping other people in Mansfield specifically. I would interview musicians who had never been interviewed before and try and get them some sort of like recognition, because it feels really great. Like, you're interviewing me, and this is like maybe my second or third interview ever, but it's awesome to just have someone genuinely want to hear what I have to say.
Yeah.
And I wanted to allow these musicians who are like unbelievable. There are so many good musicians in Richland County. It's crazy.
Some of my friends on bass like have bands and stuff like that are just awesome in this area.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. There must be something in the water. It's not fluoride, my dentist tells me, but there's something in the water that
it's probably all the extra rust and calcium. Everybody's getting all their electrolytes.
Build up, yeah. But no, it's awesome because I have yet to have an interview that I didn't feel was spectacular in at least some way, whether it's because they're awesome, or it's because like they say something, or I realized that something didn't work and that I shouldn't go down that path anymore. But so we started with a handheld Tascam, like one of those $100 things that I bought in college.
Yep.
I mean, my mom bought it for me in college, and
that's okay. You didn't have to tell everybody that. But.
Well, I have no shame. And I mean, you asked how people would. This is my journey. And so, yeah, so I started with that, and I would bring people into this little office that was not soundproofed at all. So sometimes the air conditioning would come on, and you would just hear this for like, I don't know, 45 seconds in the middle of an interview.
Nice.
And it also, I would probably say, was not very good, because podcasting is a skill, right? Like, you have to not be afraid of the microphone. And I know for a fact that I've gotten significantly better, but I'm still not awesome at not using the word as a gap filler. I do that all the time, and I really try my best to not all the time, but sometimes
now that
you do
said it, it's kind of like the word like. It's just going to be contagious.
Well, I'm going to really not try to do that. So
I believe in you.
Thank you. It's much appreciated. But it's so it was me and another reporter at the time who were doing podcasts with these handheld things. She was using a lavalier mic and going out to them. I asked people to come in because I felt like even if it wasn't soundproofed, there was a closet, or there was a door that would keep some sound out. So you said that you listened to like episode 10, and I don't remember who that was with, but that was back in that almost coat closet of an office space. And so that didn't work very well. But the point, I guess, is that content was being created, and it was going well enough, and people were sharing it enough that my publisher decided that we should invest in real podcasting material. So that's where we are now. We have these, cloud lifters and SM, whatever you called them,
7B.
Yeah, 7Bs. And now I am running 3 podcasts. I host 2 of them and produce 3 of them. And people around the office call me the Podfather, which is just one of the weirdest but coolest things that I've ever had happen to me. And I would say that it's easily the thing that I do that I'm most excited about getting to do.
Right.
And I sort of have this whole way about going at it that I just feel is only getting better as we do it. So whether it's me being able to show more personality in front of the microphone, or
you get to do that behind mics. You don't have to be super professional 24/7.
No, so no one from Richland Source listens to my podcast. or at least used to not. Now they will, and I'll definitely get an email.
Right.
Hi, Jay. But so I pretty much had the freedom to sort of develop who I wanted to be. So on like the Open Mic podcast, there are a lot of musicians who swear. And so like, you just make that okay. And in Chalk Murder to Me, we're talking about people who get murdered or get raped or, these horrific things that no one really wants to imagine happening to them. So yeah, they're going to swear. There's going to be cursing. The thing is that maybe is different about Chalk Murder to Me. And actually, this is something that I would love to get into more about why I think Chalk Murder to Me works so well, is that we found a niche within true crime podcasting because, everyone has done a true crime podcast that has a podcast network. It's like the most
it's top 3.
Yeah. There's just so many
Health
of
and
them.
Wellness, true crime.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Huge.
And I think that the thing that sort of sets Chalk Murder to Me, that's what it's called, Chalk Murder to Me. That's what sets it apart is that we talk to people who were there. So we've spoken with prosecutors, we've spoken to detectives, we've spoken to someone who works in the Mansfield Police Department's crime lab, and we get all this really cool sort of like almost background information about cases. Probably one of my favorite ones that we've done was about this guy named DeQuellen Harris who went through the murder. He like kidnapped his wife while trying to pick up his child. They were living apart, so they were estranged. I think that's the word I want to use. And there was a scuffle in the house, according to police records, and he ended up kidnapping his wife, and then he murdered his wife, and then he went on a date with another girl in Mansfield. And so, like, off the bat, like that's bleeping nuts, man. Like it's crazy.
God.
And so we managed to get the detective who worked that case, and so we asked him questions like, how did you feel when DeQuellen Harris ran from you, or like things that you just don't really know by reading the story.
You get to actually talk to the person,
right? Like when you're talking about like murder cases in your garage with your drinking buddy, you're not going to be able to get that information because you don't have the detective at your disposal, like I have managed to have because of me reporting and working with the police officers so often that like I see them at the coffee shop all the time. And it's a very weird relationship that I have with the Mansfield Police Department in a really great way where like oftentimes, especially with the heads of the departments, we're more friends than we are
frenemies.
Yeah. I would. Yeah. And I know that that's sort of like a scary thing to say for a reporter because you're like supposed to be able to like catch them with their pants down, so to speak, as you know what I mean? Like if they do something wrong, you have to report on it. And the cool thing is that I think that they genuinely know that. They know that if a police officer shoots a human being, I'm going to report on it, and I have reported on it. But the difference is that Richland Source also tries really hard to show off what they're doing well, and that's something.
I think it's like a parent that's constantly like the whole conditioning thing.
Right.
Like if you're a parent that's constantly beating the crap out of your kid, they're going to expect you to just beat the crap out of them 24/7 and not going to enjoy your presence that much.
Right.
But if you like give them a cookie every now and then and like consistently have a balance between cookie, spray bottle, cookie, spray bottle.
Right.
You know what I mean? Then you end up with that relationship where it's, okay, I respect you because you're willing to tell the positives.
But I also have a duty to the general public.
That I know that you're going to hold me accountable.
Right.
That's the difference. It's like you're not purposely trying to catch me with my pants down.
Right.
But you're going to hold me accountable if I mess up.
Exactly.
And so it becomes like that dichotomous relationship where you're now looked at as a leader rather than somebody that's just trying to get their name publicized.
Right. Well, also, I mean, going back to what we were sort of originally talking about with this line of talking, the police department has shared Chalk Murder to Me on their Facebook page. So like,
wow, that's awesome.
It's awesome. It's this really cool thing that Chalk Murder to Me is able to do because while we're sort of talking about these horrific things that have happened throughout the state of Ohio, we're highlighting the fact that they're over for the most part. There's been a couple that are cold cases, and like the Amy Mahalovic one, the 30-year anniversary of her kidnapping, I think, happened in October. And so that's still ongoing, but we're also sort of highlighting all the positives. And I think that the family, I mean, I think the mother's dead. I don't actually know what's up with the dad. But anyway, anyone who's been following this case is probably excited that it's getting more attention, because the more attention that it gets, the more likely it is that this case will be solved.
Right.
And
and that's why true crime is another reason why it's blown up so big.
Right, because everyone wants to be the hero.
Yep, everybody wants to be the hero.
And it's always going to be me.
I got your back,
That's
buddy.
the personality that I get to include in my podcast.
Oh, man. All right.
Yeah.
Well, if we needed to wrap this up in a nice little pretty box, right?
Sure.
We kind of went through high school. We got through getting into journalism, traveling around. I mean, just the ability to move and everything like that is awesome. Having the experience of being in a smaller town, and then moving to a small town, which is technically a leg up. I mean, it's kind of like when I graduated high school. I graduated the class of 96, and then I went to a college, and I was like, "There's 3,000 people here. That's huge."
Right.
And now I'm like, "No, it's not really that big." But perspective is everything. So we move on. If you had to distill down, your top couple of tips for people that are trying to get into podcasting, right? And you wanted to say, hey, if there were some things that I wish that I would have known about when I started down this journey with my handheld recorder, what are some potholes that you wished that you would have missed? And then after you establish those potholes, I always just open up the floor for it to be yours. If there's any message that you want to get to the Apex community, the floor is yours.
Okay. So you're going to have to help me through that, I think. The first thing you wanted me to
First
answer.
part is just potholes. Potholes that you wish that you could have avoided when you first started podcasting.
Okay. I would genuinely say that I would not do anything else. I would not have done anything differently. I think that every sort of pothole, as you said, that I learned my way out of has only made me better at my job and better as a podcaster. I think maybe I wish that I had gone through things more quickly, or the bumps in the road had come sooner so that I could sort of know how to do these things. So for instance, when we didn't have the podcast studio that we're sitting in now, it was harder because I didn't know that what we're doing right now was even possible. I didn't know that sound quality would be such a huge difference, but we're getting reviews in person more than on the Apple Podcast app of people who are like, yeah, the sound quality of your podcasts are incredible. And I didn't really realize that was something that was super important. And I know that sounds stupid because who's going to want to listen to
it's like the first 30 seconds
recording
of a show or something like that. People make their decision on audio quality.
Right. And there are ins and outs of podcasting that I wish that I had realized. I really try and keep up. I subscribe to this, I can't remember what it's called right now, which is unfortunate for them because I think that they definitely should be listened to by anyone who's interested in doing a podcast. Maybe I'll send you the name of it after the podcast is over. But it's this, I think, monthly or weekly newsletter, and they sort of share their thoughts on podcasting in general, and they send out links to articles on podcasting. And one of the things that it said was the first week of your podcast being out there is the most critical time for people to see it, because people are always going to want to look into what you're doing. They're if it's a new podcast, they're interested in seeing what it is. And so that's your time when you see the most spiked interest. And that's true.
Right.
We have Libsyn, and so we use Libsyn statistics a lot, and we have these huge bumps. I think the very first Chalk Murder to Me podcast had 10 times as many downloads as the rest of season 1, simply because more people were interested in it. And what's unfortunate is that was a really great podcast, but those of the people that I know, my friends who listen to Chalk Murder to Me, have told me that the style of podcast is extremely different from episode 1 to the season finale, because Adam and I, my co-host, got so much more comfortable in front of the microphone, in front of each other. Like, we were cool with being silly. We were cool with like being serious, and we sort of also,
You find your rhythm.
yeah, exactly. We found this rhythm, and we became an actual pair, and it's so much more fun to be in the studio with him than it was the very first podcast. Not that it wasn't fun, but just like we sort of like, it's like, oh, we know what we're doing now. And I think that probably makes it a more enjoyable podcast to listen to.
Right.
And then, so yeah, I mean, I think that all the potholes, going back to your original statement or question, I think that they're all super necessary. And it's really sort of just learning that you not only should, but you are able to overcome any type of adversity or pothole, whether it's like sound recording, or you don't understand how to use a soundboard, or you don't have the right microphone,
Right.
or you don't know how to market yourself. That's something that I wish that I still did a lot better at marketing. But you just have to get over, like, learn how to get over it. And then that's going to make you a significantly more confident podcaster.
Oh yeah. I would say that, like, to kind of wrap that up in a statement for people is, I see a lot of people get stuck in this paralysis by analysis. Sometimes you just got to take the step forward, and if you step into a massive pothole and break your ankle, then cast it and hobble.
I was
for a
friends
little
with this
bit,
guy,
but-
well, we're still friends. He was on the Bowling Green baseball team. His name is CJ Schilt. Really, really cool guy. Much cooler guy than I am. Like super cool. Like 1,000 likes on Instagram photos. And he always said something called, "You've got to risk it to get the biscuit."
Yep.
And I always thought that was really stupid, but I think that applies here.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so if you had, your final
Yeah.
message.
So, my mom had these rules, not really rules, but like almost like the golden rule, where, like, you treat people the way you want to be treated, sort of thing, that she would always talk to me about. And one of those things, I think the latest thing that she told me was my sophomore year of college. She said, "Noah, I'm really impressed with how well you're doing in school. I think you do a really good job of blooming where you're planted." And I think that is really awesome, because like, I've traveled a lot around in my life, from St. Louis to Nevada, Missouri, to Bowling Green, and this, we're now out of order, but to Mansfield.
Right. You've gone along.
I've gone all over the country. Well, I've gone all over the Midwest, and I think that you just sort of have to accept where you are, and you have to do something that's going to help change that community for the better. And so, for me, I think in podcasting, my way of trying to bloom where I'm planted is I'm trying to highlight all of the really great, successful musicianship that's going on. And I think that when we do the West Fourth and Goal high school football, high school basketball podcast, we're highlighting not just people who are really good at running with a ball in their hand, but we're talking with these guys who are wanting to be rocket scientists, and we're giving them the attention that they deserve. And I think that that's the journalist's job, is to represent the community. And I think that I've never done that better than being at Richland Source, whether it's through video, podcasting, news writing. I'm very proud of Richland Source as a company, and I think that I could not see myself doing a better job than I'm doing right now, which is cool, because eventually I'll do an even better job. But like right now, I think that I'm just at the apex of my career.
Yeah, you're just pushing. And the beautiful thing about an apex, and what we try to tell people, is that we used to say, once you reach your apex, the only direction to go is down. So you can't reach your apex until your death, right? But we kind of modified that, because we realized that people hit these different apexes all throughout their life. So rather than hitting an apex and going down, what we teach people how to do is, you hit your apex, you might plateau for a little bit. Don't go down, plateau. Detach, reevaluate, figure out what your next mountain is, and then start chasing that apex. So you never actually go down. You just hit a peak. And like you said, you're going to eventually do an even better job. So right now, you're going to ride out this apex for a period of time.
Right.
On a plateau, because plateaus are where people stop to rest when they're climbing mountains. They take They set up camp. They have a meal. They, enjoy the stars for a little bit. And that's okay as long as you don't do that for 15 years. And then you start climbing up the next part of the mountain.
Right.
Right. I don't have anything else to add to that. I think blooming where you're planted is a beautiful phrase, and I'm definitely going to steal that.
Awesome. I'm going to go call my mom.
Yeah, you can let her know.
Thanks for letting me be on the show.
No problem, man. So if you want to support the Apex Podcast, you can go to www.patreon.com/the Apex Podcast. Right now, we're reworking some of the tiers. However, for right now, you can do $5 a month, get a sticker and a handwritten letter in the mail, plus a shout out on the show. So if you want to do that, we would be eternally grateful because it helps us buy equipment and support what we're doing to get you awesome content. You can follow us on Instagram at the Apex Podcast with underscores on both sides. And my personal Instagram is at Jan_Almasy. RJ's is at Doc Holiday. Noah, where can people find you?
Oh, so they can find me and the podcast in a number of places. The Richland Source Facebook page is a really cool place to sort of see all of Richland Source assets. Chalk Murder to Me has a Twitter. I believe it's Chalk Murder to Me on Twitter.
Yep.
The Open Mic Podcast is sort of a subsidy, if you will, of Newsroom After Hours, and that's an Instagram account. It's called Newsroom After Hours. And my personal Twitter is at Nojo15, Nojo15, and I also am on Instagram.
Perfect. Cool. Well, until next time, guys, keep chasing that apex.